And the word was about the Lord releasing some things that have been held up. That this was a time and a season where the constellations of destinies would be aligning, and there would be some things happening concerning promises that were due to generations. And here's the word, that this is the time that the testimonies have triumphed in travail. That testimonies that have gone up and have been testified not only in the earth but in heaven are getting ready to be fulfilled from generations ago. That this would not only bring about a restoration but a naturalization and a sanctification to the land. This is about God's eternal time, his appointed timing. And I had an encounter in 2021, somewhere between, I would say, October, November, somewhere in that particular time frame, that was very, very supernatural. My first time experiencing anything of the sort. I had a very supernatural experience, and it was during a prayer session with a group of 25, I would say, other prophetic intercessors. And I experienced a true move of God that I had never encountered before. I remember waking up that morning with this burden that I couldn't quite pinpoint. And as the session was going on, and everyone was exchanging and speaking and communing with one another, I began to really get burdened, and I felt the urge to release something. I had this feeling of release, but I wasn't quite sure. Was it a physical release? Did I need to cry? I had no clue what I needed to release. The intensity of this feeling had become so weighty that I texted one of the other intercessors who was also attending the meeting, and I said, something is going on with me. I said, I don't know what it is, but I just feel like I have to release something. And I don't want to interrupt. But I felt like it had something to do with what was being spoken, or to do with the group, that everyone needed to know what was happening. And so she said, oh my God, one of the other prayer partners just said the same thing. So suddenly I began to have this contraction happening in my belly. It was like my belly, my back. It was as if I was in labor, and I've never had this happen before. And so I just couldn't hold it anymore, and I interrupted the conversation to inform the leader of the group at the time of what was happening, because I knew that it was a move from God. I knew that it was a move from God. And she began to coach me through, and she was like, you're in travail. You've got to push something out. You're pushing something out in the spirit into the natural. And I labored for about 40 minutes, and I began weeping and crying out. And all I knew was that I was releasing some sort of burden that wasn't my own. I felt like perhaps it may have been connected to me in some sort of way, but it really wasn't my burden. But I could feel the heart of whatever it was, whether it was God's heart or the people's heart that this burden was from. And for about 40 minutes, I just wept and cried and pushed and wailed. And all of a sudden, the friend who I texted, she began to travail as well. And there was just like this session of travail between the three of us. Honestly, I believe it was three of us. And I believe that this was some sort of release from heaven for something God wanted to be birthed into the earth. And I began to prophesy as I was travailing what the Lord had begun to say to me. That this was for all of the mothers. The travail that I was experiencing and what I was pushing out was for some sort of burden that was for the mothers that were in the room, for the elders perhaps who have been praying for something, or for a long time for some things. It felt like something eternal, something generational that was being released to fulfill something that God said was owed to these individuals or to generations or to their families. And I began to just wail and push and just labor and labor. And it was such an intense experience that for weeks, I felt like I had given birth. I had to literally, be restored by God the same way a woman is to be restored after she gives birth to a physical baby. And I never quite understood exactly what that was, but I began to put certain things together. And this word that the Lord had given me about the time that the testimonies would triumph and travail began to come to me, and I realized that this was connected in some sort of way. And so I believe that May is a continuum of an eternal work that the Lord is doing.